Today, on episode 58 of Rail Talk, we celebrate a Travers for the ages and 10,000 subscribers. Woo! What a milestone. If you haven't subscribed yet, go do it right now. The button is right below this talking face. Hit that button. Tell your family, your friends to hit that button. I'm Joe Bianca. I'm an ownership advisor at West Point Thoroughbreds. And John, usually I have something snarky or cheeky to say in the open, but the vibes are too positive, man. I'm just happy to see you.
Well, you know, we're so happy to have Patty Wolf back from her world travels. I think that's a big part of it. So welcome back, Patricia. Jonathan Green, general manager at DJ Stable. And Joe, I am not in my usual haunts. I am actually taking a couple days off to break before the most exciting time of the year, which is September, October into November, and just trying to catch some rays and get some good energy. And I am just really excited to do episode 58, the Carl Banks of episodes.
So these are my kind of shows, John. We have nothing really to talk about except racing. And the racing was fabulous on both sides of the Atlantic in the past week. We'll obviously start with the Travers. It was a phenomenal day of racing. Great weather, great crowd, 47,000 plus through the turnstiles at Saratoga. Record handle, $63 million. Blew away the previous record for a Travers day at Saratoga. So it's shout out to everybody at NYRA for putting on a great show. Shout out to the horses. Shout out to the people who did the work behind the scenes to get everybody to those races. We got to start with the big one, the Travers. John, there's been some great renewals over the years. I think of Arrogate's huge blowout win. I think of the dead heat between Golden Ticket and Alpha. There's some really, really good Travers to remember. To me, this one tops the list. And a big part of it was that Kenny McPeak entered Thorpedo Anna in that race. He didn't have to do that. He did it for the sporting gesture. And she gave Fierceness all that he could handle. They both got 111 buyers. In this day and age, you don't see 110 plus buyers all that much, especially from 3-year-olds. And they laid it all on the line through the Saratoga stretch. Thorpedo Anna just didn't quit. She got a great trip, I thought, under Brian Hernandez. She just kept coming. Fierceness has proven now that he can string races together. To me, he's the new leader in the clubhouse in the 3-year-old division. Proved he could go 1.25 miles. He still he got a good trip, so there was really not a straw on his path, but he had to win that race. The other speeds didn't stick around. Sierra Leone, once again, comes up short, ran well, but once again was overbet and is becoming a bit of a money burner. But I won't focus on that. I'll focus on the top two because, John, those are the two. You could make the argument, I think, Arthur's Ride is the only other one I'd put in there. You can make the argument that those are the two best horses in the country that we saw throw down in the Travers on Saturday.
Well, it was everything we had hoped for and a little bit more than we expected. I mean, it was just an incredible race between really a couple of champions. I mean, Fierceness is a champion. Thorpedo Anna is quickly becoming a champion. And you give credit to, like you said, Kenny McPeak for even offering up the filly into a race like that. And Joe, we talked about the race and we talked about how many grade 1 and grade 2 winners there were and how this was a quote unquote legitimate grade 1, on paper coming in. And it blew me away with the finish. And a couple of things that I now have to take out of my repertoire. Number one is the race sets up for Sierra Leone. Okay. All right. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me 8 times. It's a good thing I don't bet.
If you say it again, you should have to get that tattooed on you somewhere. The race sets up for Sierra Leone.
Instead of
wow.
Yeah, that's a whole other story.
Edgier than I thought you'd be.
The other thing, Joe, is I have to take out of my lexicon is Fierceness is inconsistent. Now, you can still kind of say that, but 3 out of the past 4 now, he's put together phenomenal races in the Florida Derby, the Jim Dandy, and now the Travers. A couple of grade 1s and a grade 2, and the Jim Dandy, being like a grade 2 plus as far as I'm concerned. And now you look at him and you say, okay, well, was he champion as a 2-year-old by default? Maybe you can make that argument. He won an impressive race at Saratoga, breaking his maiden, and then he won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile 2 out of his 3 races. But now he's strung together. Like I said, 3 out of the past 4 races have been very, very good. The 111 buyer is outstanding. It was only a point better than his Florida Derby, but he is ascending now into, hitting his stride. going into the biggest races of the 3-year-old campaign now that the Derby and the Preakness and the Belmont are behind us. The other thing that surprised me about the race, Joe, is that nobody wanted the lead. There were 3 or 4 horses that we looked at and said, well, Unmatched Wisdom can go to the front, Batten Down can go to the front, Honor Marie is fresh and has the blinkers on, can go to the front, and yet none of them wanted to go. Not even toe-to-toe. None of them wanted to go to the front end, which really kind of boggled my mind. But it doesn't matter. Fierceness and Thorpedo Anna, on any given day, either one of them could have beaten the other. But it was just a great race, and it was a feel-good story on a lot of levels. And I think, Rapoli and his team handled everything with class, and which is also something that's a little unusual, but they handled it the right way. And now I'm just looking forward to letting the horses talk for themselves. And this battle that's going to happen in November.
Yeah, well, I always love the cuts to the Rapoli box after he wins. He was passed out. He was just lying prone in the box. He was so overwhelmed with excitement. That's what it's all about. And like I said, Kenny McPeak and Thorpedo Anna are the reason that we got the show that we did. Not to take anything away from Fierceness, because like I said, I think he's now the best 3-year-old in the country, has a legit chance to be 2-year-old champion and 3-year-old champion back to back. And that doesn't happen all that often, and really was kind of inconceivable if you went back to the Derby. It didn't seem like he would even really make an impact in this division, much less be at the top after the Travers. But yeah, I think, Kenny McPeak and Thorpedo Anna were the show that day, and they did not disappoint. And, it's not just a sporting gesture. I was thinking about this. I think it's a good money move sometimes too, to make this kind of decision, because Power Squeeze got $330K for winning the Alabama. Thorpedo Anna got $250 for running second in the Travers, and 2 more jumps, she gets $750. So it sometimes can be a lucrative move too, not just a sporting move to do for the good of the sport. And so that's what's kind of interesting if we spin this conversation and spin this outlook forward, is what he's going to do with her the rest of the year. Now, he said that he's going to run the Cotillion and then run in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. I think there's a little bit of time for him to maybe change his mind on that, because the Breeders' Cup Classic is $7 million. What's the Distaff, 2 or 3? We need a fact checker. Julia, where are you at? But it's definitely a lot less than the Classic. And who do you really have to be scared of? I mentioned Arthur's Ride. He's got that one big race in the Whitney. But other than that, you just ran against the best horses in the country, and you came up this short. And for those listening, my fingers are very close together right now. And it is a phenomenal effort that proves she can run with anybody in the country, if not the world. So I kind of hope he reconsiders. I think the Cotillion is a no-brainer in terms of the spacing. Go back against fillies, collect an easy $600K. Nobody's going to touch her in that race. But I kind of hope he reconsiders and starts thinking about the Classic.
Yeah, the only thing I would say about that, Joe, is that at some point in time, a champion is only minted once out of every crop. And I think when they're looking at Thorpedo Anna, unless they're going to keep her to breed themselves, it's worth a lot more to the general market to be a champion. And for her to be a champion in the filly division is a lot easier than for her to be a champion against the boys. I'm not saying she can't beat the boys, because obviously she has, and obviously she's come very close again. But at this stage of the game, I personally understand the idea of taking the easier road, the Cotillion, and then shipping her to California and running in the Breeders' Cup, winning the Classic, the filly division, and then earning it in the probably in Night of Stars, we would hope, because she is a Fasig grad. And then having her value, added exponentially by a couple $1 million because she is a champion.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, but I don't think who's going to catch her. Who's going to catch her in this division? Power Squeeze is the only one who has even a prayer, because she won the Alabama, she won the Delaware Oaks, she won the Gulfstream Oaks, I believe. But that's only one grade 1.
Right.
Torpedo Anna's got 3. She's got a second in the Travers. I don't think that this division is losable for her at this point. So why not take the bigger shot? And I looked it up, $2 million. My instinct was correct for the Distaff, $7 million for the Classic. So there's a world where you can run second in the Classic and have, a kind of similar payout to what you would have for winning the Distaff, at least in the same ballpark. That brings me to another race I want to talk about. And there's so many races that we're going to talk about from the past week. So, John, if you want to jump in and throw something else out there, feel free. But I wanted to mention Idiomatic in the personal Ensign on Friday. I dare you to find me a horse who's run better in defeat this year than Idiomatic, because she and Randomize hooked up all the way around, and she buried Randomized. Randomized had nothing turning for home. And no disrespect to Raging Sea, because she did have to come and get her, but Idiomatic was really gasping in that last 16th of a mile, understandably, just got nailed in the last jump. So that's twice this year that I think that she's been clearly the best horse. When she lost to Randomized in the Ogden Phipps, she didn't break that well. She didn't go to the lead. That's why I'm curious to hear your take on this, John. I see Florent Giroux getting a lot of criticism for his ride on her, and I get that. But I honestly, and just from my perspective, I can't have it both ways, because I was critical of him for not being aggressive and going to the front in the Ogden Phipps. This time he was aggressive. He did go to the front. Unfortunately, Randomized was on apparently a suicide mission and set it up for her stablemate perfectly. So I can't really get mad at him over that. You could say, once it seemed like they were going too fast, you could have taken back a little bit and gone outside of her. But you can't have it both ways. People were mad at him for the Molly Pitcher ride too, and Brad Cox has stuck with him. But yeah, I think she's just been an unbelievably unlucky horse so far this year, and I think she's clearly still the best fillier mare in the country, older fillier mare in the country. John, any thoughts on the personal ensign?
I didn't really have a lot of thoughts on the personal ensign. I know you were going to tackle that one on your own, and I think you encapsulated it exactly right. And again, it is a gift that we're continuing to watch her race, because in a lot of other camps, she wouldn't have been racing right now. She'd be either pregnant or have a foal by her side. I went a little bit different route, and I know we're going to kind of jump around a couple different races, Joe, but I was looking at a race that really impressed me. There was two of them. One was Domestic Product in the Jerkens. I was really impressed because I was always of the opinion that his racing style lent itself to running further and running a mile and a quarter, a mile and an eighth, at the very least. And they cut him back to the 1 turn 7/8 of a mile. And he ran down a great field in that race. I mean, it really was a shockingly good field for a sprint race like that, and beat up on, well, not beat up, but beat Prince of Monaco and the rest of that field. Bookham Dano, who is probably, I would have said before the race, legitimately the best 3-year-old sprinter in the country, but took on a number of good horses in a distance that he had never run before, and won, and he has just found a new dimension. Which 9-10 races into a horse's career, that's not easy to do. So I give Chad Brown and his team, Klarovich et al., a lot of credit for cutting him back in distance. When you have a come from behind distance horse, that's not usually the move that you look at, but they knew their horse better.
Yeah, no, it was a great race. 106 buyer that we said before the card, that before Saturday, that was like the most stacked race on the card. I also want to mention the Sword Dancer. I got to give you credit, John, because I thought that was just going to be a Godolphin procession, 1-2, and I think it kind of felt like a miscalculation to me by the Godolphin and Charlie Appleby team. I mean, for a horse to be on the front end, doling out those kind of splits, very, very soft fractions, when your horses, both of them, Silver Knot and Measured Time, have proven to be very, very tough to beat when they're up on the pace. I thought they overthought that a little bit and screwed up and just assumed that Farbridge was going to quit, which he didn't, obviously. Yep. So mega shout out to the Clements. Great training job. Masterful ride. I already gave you your shout out. Like, this is... John, we've moved on. You got your credit. It's like you're free to pat yourself on the back once I'm done, but okay, sorry, I don't know what else you want from me, brother. Anyway, I just wanted to shout out the Clements and Joel Rosario, the people who actually did it on the racetrack, for an unbelievable job with that horse. And I guarantee you, if you asked Charlie Appleby if he could have a do-over, he'd want at least one of those horses. Don't know which one of them to be on the lead, because they kind of overthought it, I think, a little bit.
Right. Yeah, and since, Joe, we're both patting me on the back, I'm going to go to another reason why you should be, so in awe of my overall, analytics, and that is, where did Vava finish in the Ballerina?
Whoa, low blow.
And who won? Who won though?
Low blow.
Julia, can we run back to that part of last show where we talked about this?
I'm not poo-pooing Vava. I really like her as a racehorse. We've talked about her before. I think Sherry DeVoe's done a phenomenal job with the horse. But yeah, you got to talk about more than one horse in a grade 1, for God's sake, Joe. Come on.
This is what John does. Like, he didn't pick the horse.
I did pick Society.
You said, no, you didn't.
In the race.
You did it. You said there were other nice horses in there. Society's a nice horse. That counts as picking a horse to public handicapper Jon Green over here.
It does. It definitely does. It's why people listen to the show, quite frankly, because they need the yin and the yang.
Yes, they need your handicapping insights for sure. That's what people come for.
Joe, can we also talk about some races north of the border, because there was a filly there that beat the boys in $1 million race, and it wasn't the Travers. It was Caitlin or Greatness, who actually went 1.25 miles and beat the boys in the King's Plate. I think that was a big surprise for a lot of people as well.
Yeah, no, I mean that's your department. You're the Canada reporter here. I just wanted to touch on the Ballerina real quick, just because. No, we'll go back to Canada. I just wanted to touch on it because it was a disappointing effort for Vava, and the division has changed a lot since she won the Grade 1 earlier in the year on Derby Day. It seemed like she kind of had it, not in the bag, obviously, because still a lot of time to go, but she had the kind of the inside track on getting that championship. But now Society's got the Grade 1 win, and I don't know if you saw on Sunday night Rancho Bernardo Stakes at Del Mar.
Right.
Sweet as Tekka.
Right.
That was a weak field. That was kind of a paid workout, but man, is she scary. Like, to me, and especially with the filly and mare sprint, the Breeders' Cup being in her backyard
exactly.
at Del Mar.
Yeah.
Like, to me, those are the big three now leading up to the filly and mare sprint: Vava, Society, and Sweet as Tekka. So it should be a fun race.
No, I think
tell us more about the Woodbine greats.
So we had the King's Plate. We already talked about that. That was very impressive, and I know that representatives from WinStar were actually up there to accept the trophy, which was great. That whole card got moved off a week, Joe, if you remember. So it was a little bit of kind of a shitstorm because they had to move the races, and they decided to make it on a Friday instead of on Travers Saturday or Del Mar Sunday, and they did. But what it did for the rest of us fans is it gave us like a 3-day weekend of great racing, kicked off by Woodbine. And again, since we're talking about how good I am, because we certainly will be talking about one thing that I screwed up on, but the Catch a Glimpse, we put in, we had Bullet in there who we fully expected to run off, and she was like 3-5 in the race. And then we put a maiden in there, Shifty, primarily because she made a huge ground after breaking like dead last and ended up 5th, but made up literally 15 lengths in a sprint race against the boys. So we're like, she probably, if she had won that race, we would have put her in this race anyway in the Catch a Glimpse. Let's go ahead and put her in there. And all she did was win and run an 85 buyer, which is the highest buyer for a 2-year-old filly turf race of this year. So we were just shocked. If you said, "Hey, you're going to win the Catch a Glimpse," I probably would have said, "Yeah, that's a pretty good bet." Not with the also ran. I mean, not with the 6-1 in the race when you have Bullet in there. We did come back and find out that after the race we scoped Bullet, and she came up with a head full of mucus and was a 4-5 in that sense. So in that sense, the extra 5 days off or 6 days off hurt us because she was peaking last week, and this week we didn't know she was sick. Even though we take temperatures and we scope them and everything like that the day before the race. But she put in kind of as much as she could, and then she just couldn't breathe anymore. But Shifty, I mean, I was just shocked and amazed at just how brilliantly she ran. And Joe, I think that with the timing of it, she's actually going to run. I'll announce it here for the first time. Shifty is
That's my drum
It is
roll.
a Rail Talk exclusive that we're going to run Shifty in the Miss Grillo in New York to give her the little extra time because we don't want her to bounce.
Does that mean you're going to come to Aqueduct? Are you going to slum it at Aqueduct with me, John?
It depends on the time of the year. Yeah, I might have to.
Okay,
I might have to, but
that might be on my honeymoon. But
oh well, forget it. Then we're not running her there. I was doing it for you. That was your wedding present from us.
Sometimes even more exciting to win with the horse you didn't expect to win with.
Sometimes
so that's very cool.
Sometimes you come home from the dance with the girl that brought you, and sometimes you just come home.
Yeah. You have a lot of experience in that. So we have so much racing to talk about. We're going to take a quick break, and then after this, we're going to go from Shifty to Swifties. After this,
ooh, I like that transition.
Rail Talk is sponsored by the Green Group, the #1 accounting firm in the horse business. Len and DJ Stable own over 200 horses. They won over 2,500 races. They've got close to 1,000 clients in the horse business because they make the money and save them taxes. And you can catch Len at the Keeneland September sale. He's going to be walking around the grounds looking at horses. The absolute last deadline for corporations and partnerships to file their taxes for 2024 is September 15th. So it's good timing to see Len, ask him any remaining questions you have before you file those returns. And then we've got the the extended deadline for normal people, the rest of us, October 15th. So obviously Len is a great resource for us regular folks as well. He saved so many people in the business money and made this a more profitable, more manageable enterprise for everyone in the horse business that's gone to see him. And there's a special offer for listeners of Rail Talk, complimentary, confidential, half-hour consultation. Len guarantees you'll get value. Call him up at, what's that number, Michael?
732-634-5100. Green Group.
That's right. Or go to greenco.com and do it before year's end so he can prove to you that he'll save you taxes. He guarantees he'll find you value and savings, but you don't have to take it from me. Listen to this absolute star that Len Green has helped in the industry, Todd Pletcher.
Green Group has been doing our taxes for about the last 5 years. The Green Group was highly recommended to us by the McLaughlins, Karen and Letty. We were sort of in a transitional stage with our accountants, and we had someone who we'd been with for a long time, and we were kind of having trouble finding the exact right replacement. And the thing that was attractive about the Green Group to us is their familiarity with horse racing. And, so that we found that their knowledge of the horse industry has been very helpful to us. Well, I think what the Green Group can offer you is their knowledge of the business, some, tax incentives and certain areas of the business that apply only to horse racing. So it's great to have a group that's familiar with the horse racing aspect, and particularly as a trainer, gives you some additional write-offs and look at some things from some different angles than maybe a group that is not familiar with horse racing.
Thank you, Todd, for that unbelievable testimonial. Appreciate you, and congratulations on the win over the weekend. And congratulations to Len and DJ Stable for their wins over the weekend as well. Call them up at 732-634-5100 or go to greenco.com. So there is Taylor Swift content coming up. Don't you worry your pretty little heads. But there's another point I wanted to make about Travers Day before we put a bow on that. And John, feel free to bring up any other points that you had from the weekend. But races and days like that remind me why I love this game, and just I thought about it. I was struck by like what a difference a year makes, because we go back to last year on Travers Day and it was bleak. It was a very, very dark time in racing to have Maple Leaf Mel breakdown on Whitney Day and then have New York Thunder breakdown on Travers Day. That was a horrible, horrible time. And we talked to Dylan Davis last week, and you asked a great question, John. You asked him, do you feel safer with the new rules, with the new safety rules? And he said yes. Mm-hmm. He said straight up, I feel like I'm riding sounder horses. I'm riding against sounder horses. And I think that you have to give a lot of the credit to that. Obviously, it's a one-off thing. Obviously, we could have had a breakdown on Saturday. Heisa's not going to prevent every single tragedy. But I think that the industry and Heisa deserves a lot of credit to getting us to the point where I'm not fearing the worst anymore. There was a while when after the Maple Leaf Mel and New York Thunder incidents where if I saw a horse opening up a big lead in the stretch, I was holding my breath because it was such a traumatic thing to see that multiple times. And I just don't feel that way anymore. And yeah, does Heisa have some clunky pain in the ass, sometimes unjust effects? Yeah. And we should work to rectify those things. And I think they and we mostly have, but it was a beautiful, beautiful Travers Day. And I feel safer as a viewer and a bettor that I'm not going to tune in and see something horrible or corrupt or both like we used to see. And I just think it's worth celebrating that for this, that what that means for this year, but also what it means for the future of the sport.
And Joe, your thoughts are spot on. We can feel more comfortable if the product that's out there is safer. And are there going to be issues going forward? Yeah, there always are, because we're dealing with athletes, and they have heartbeats and they have soundness, and things can change at a moment's notice. My mom used to always say that from an engineering standpoint, there was no reason why horses should ever stay upright, because they have so much velocity and thrust on their legs, and basically they're running on the equivalent of your index finger. I mean, that's basically the ratio of weight to area. And they never should stay up, but they do, and they're graceful, and it's the reason why we all love watching them run and compete. And Joe, I remember it was in the previous show meaning the other place, where we did a show after the Derby, and I remember you and I were talking on air about how after every single race was over, we both counted heads. Okay, there were 9 horses in this race. Oh, thank God, 9 horses are coming back. That shouldn't be the way that racing is. But it was at that time. And now through all the things that are going on, it's getting safer and better, which is, what you and I have always tried to promote and be a part of. I thought the other thing that was good is that, it kind of went under the radar a little bit because it didn't have anything to do with racing, but they raised $5,000 more for the backstretch charities. Shout out to Aaron Yagoda for implementing the dunk tank. So for a few bucks, you got to dunk, whether it was David O'Rourke or Andy Serling or Big Hair, or I think there were 6 or 7 people that were there that each had an hour each. And credit to those guys for being good sports and understanding that they could laugh at themselves and realize that people would pay money to watch them get dunked in water. And some people hold them under, but that was an extra fee to do that. But I think it was, when we look back at this Saratoga season, for the most part, we're going to look back with a lot of good thoughts and a lot of good memories, which is really all we can ask for. Were the cards always the best? No. Did they have issues with the turf and with the rain? Yeah, but those are God-given issues. We had no control over, or they had no control over anything like that. But the racing itself, especially the big racing days, I mean, it was electric. It was electric to watch it live, and it was electric to watch it, at a distance. You could just feel how excited people were to be there and be watching arguably the best racing circuit in the year.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's just such a different paradigm right now than it was just a year ago. And it really was a beautiful thing. And that's because that's how I grew up. I grew up with just unbridled enthusiasm for the sport and for the big days, and just could not get enough. And over time, with some of the cheaters and some of the breakdowns that you see, you just naturally, your enthusiasm is sapped a little bit because you're only human. And I finally feel like that has moved back in the right direction in the last couple of years. And I hope and pray we stay on this path, because it was a wonderful, wonderful day of racing. Wonderful horse across the pond that we need to talk about. We don't discuss European racing all that often on this show, but we brought him up before. City of Troy, track record-setting performance in the Juddmonte International. Aidan O'Brien says, "This is the best horse I've ever trained." That is saying something, dude. He is arguably, I think, the greatest, in terms of horse flesh, the greatest trainer in the world for the last 30 plus years. In terms of the star power that he's had in his barn, I don't think anybody else matches up. I mean, Bob Baffert, you could say maybe Todd Pletcher, but no, I think Aidan O'Brien, has had so many great horses, with obviously the backing of the lads at Coolmore. And City of Troy was he was stunningly good in that race. Shout out to the runner-up too. It's Clandagan. I mispronouncing his name for sure, but he ran an absolutely cracker of a race, as they would say over in jolly old England. But yeah, City of Troy, I want to pull up the quotes from Aidan O'Brien, because you just don't, I joked that there was a running joke that Gary Stevens every 6 months would say, "This is the best horse I've ever ridden." Right. But this is not something that Aidan O'Brien does. He's not prone to hyperbole. And for him to say this is the best horse he's ever trained, I mean, John, I'm still looking up the quote, so why don't you go with it?
No, I mean, Joe, you look at the horse's racing career, and other than his first race back as a 3-year-old, in the 2000 Guineas, he has a spotless resume. He won the Juddmonte, as you mentioned, the Grade 1. He won the Coral Eclipse, the Betfred Derby, and then as a 2-year-old went undefeated as well. It is, just so exciting to watch a horse like that in these large fields burst through and show their dominance. Another son of Justify. Again, Justifies are running everywhere. They're running, in the States. They're running overseas. They're running on the turf. They're running on the dirt. Most of them like 2 turns, but There are some that can sprint. I mean, he is quickly becoming one of the top stallions, if not arguably the top one. With Gun Runner and Not This Time and Into Mischief. They're right now they're the Mount Rushmore of stallions. And for Aidan O'Brien, who like you said is as buttoned up as they come, to just gush over this horse and say in his history as a trainer and as the top trainer over there. Just this horse rushes to the top of the list, just blows me away. I know they made an announcement that they're coming here for the Breeders' Cup Classic. Whether or not he can do it on the dirt, obviously Aidan O'Brien, you don't bet against him. He knows what he's looking at as far as horses that can turf and dirt. But I think their feeling is that they want him to win that race here in the States. Because it obviously just exponentially increases the horse's potential as a stallion as far as what they can stand them for. But I really feel like that they believe that they have a horse that can beat the Americans and beat them on dirt. And it doesn't matter if it's Fierceness or Thorpedo Anna or anywhere in between. He just feels like that City of Troy is the best 3-year-old colt in the world.
If there were ever a year to try the Classic, this is the year. Just because there is a dearth of superstars in the older male dirt division in America. This is the time to take that shot. And I pulled up the quote. So Aidan O'Brien said, "We always felt he was something very different. Things haven't gone right for him some days, but he still overcomes them, which makes it very special. He's a horse who loves to be up with the pace and a strong pace, and he gets it really well. He stays, he's tough, and we're hoping the lads might go to the Classic with him. That would be some dream. He is the best that I've ever trained, and we always thought that. Wow. He's the most special horse we've ever had." Wow. He goes on and on like that. I think we'll see the best of him when he bounces out really strong, is left to roll, gets in a massive tempo, keeps going. People will measure his stride, but the length of it in the last 2 furlongs is incredible, really. That's what he was like at 2. He just keeps going. And Ryan said he went through the line very strong. You don't see horses finish up going that far, especially over demanding turf courses the way he did. So I cannot wait to see him at the Classic this year. He will be one of the top stories. And, he is by Justify. The dam side is a little more turf, as you would expect. But like I said, this is the time to take a shot. Wanted to touch on this story real quick before we wrap up for the weekend review portion of this show. So Travis Kelce has bought into a horse with Team Valor named Swift Delivery. So it's very fitting considering the power couple that is he and Taylor Swift. And John, I know you didn't want to tell this story, but you have a little bit of a connection to this horse, right?
Yeah, I have more of a connection, but this is one of those that Jon Green gets a thumbs down on a decision that he made rather than a thumbs up that I like to brag about. But Swift Delivery actually was a horse that we owned in partnership with Mark Cassie. Mark actually found him as a yearling, and we were going to pinhook him as a 2-year-old. It didn't work out. We ended up racing him, and he ran like 5. So before he ran, I should say, we needed a name. So I'm a Swift fan, not as much as other people, but I was like, Swift Delivery. That would be great. We named the Swift Delivery, and the horse ran like 5 or 6 times and hit the board, but didn't win. So we were putting a bunch of horses in the Fasig-Tipton digital sale in May and decided, let's put Swifty, who we always call them endearingly Swifty, let's put him in the sale. Ended up bringing $55,000. Our good friend Gary Barber ended up buying our piece out in essence to become partners with the Cassies, and now the horse has won 2 in a row, and almost like it's got Jon Green's weight off its back. So now it's like sprouted wings and is winning. Has won 2 in a row and is moving up the ladder. And somehow I don't know how Team Valor got involved, but somehow Team Valor got involved, and now they've been able to reel Mr. Swift in, as he's known, outside of the NFL, into owning a piece of them. But yes, for those of you who are listening, the original name was the intention that the horse was named after Taylor Swift, and because I too am a Swiftie, and do like to listen to her music, especially when I'm just kind of thinking about the show and thinking about what's going on and what to give Joe and Meg for their wedding present. I got Anti-Hero in the background. As a matter of fact, we named the horse Anti-Hero also, for those of you who are keeping score at home. But anyway, yeah, that was our connection to Swift Delivery, and I was a day late and $1 short, and I could have been partners with one of the Kelces.
Yeah, you've made a lot of smart decisions, but yes, I would have loved to, by proxy, be able to rub elbows with Kelsey and Taylor Swift if you had stayed in on that horse, but we can't always get what we want. I just love those crossovers. I love when big stars invest in horses. And I saw another story this week, that like thoroughbred racing league thing, that fledgling thing that's happening. Lamar Jackson now has invested in it as well. So I just love when normal life celebrities come into our little funky world here. And Jason or Travis, by any chance, if you're listening to this show, come on. We are big fans. We'd love to talk to you and love to help you, in this little education process about racing, because I know you guys are super enthusiastic.
With our 10,000 subscribers.
This is the place. 10,000 subscribers. You could be 10,005 and 6, and then maybe Taylor after that. Rail Talk is sponsored by Fasig-Tipton. The latest August digital sale closes today. Can't wait to see the results from that. Looking forward to the next physical sale. We've got the California Fall Yearlings in Pomona, California on September 24th. West Point got a nice horse out of there last year named Miles Finch. Don't tell anybody, but when he goes first out, he's live. So there's some really, really good horses to be found by those California stallions, even by Kentucky stallions that are bred in California. So check that out. Then it comes the Mid-Atlantic Fall Yearling, September 30th and October 1st in Timonium. Then the October digital sale, Saratoga Fall Mixed Sale, Upstate on October 15th. Then the Kentucky October Yearlings, October 21st through the 24th in Lexington. And that all leads up to the November sale, the Night of the Stars, November 4th in Lexington. Cannot wait to see all the fabulous mares and weanlings who are on offer there. Entries close September 3rd. So you have exactly a week from when we're recording this right now to put in entries for the November sale, the Night of the Stars. We cannot wait. It's so much fun. It's a great capper to the Breeders' Cup weekend too, especially when you're able to see those horses on the track on Breeders' Cup weekend and then see them in the ring a few days later. It's like a double celebrity sighting. It's always a ton of fun. And really, I think along with the Saratoga sale, the two biggest events to be at in the auction, in the racehorse auction market this year or any year. So shout out to Fasig. I know they're going to be busy for the next couple of months, but we already are looking forward to that November 4th November sale. Okay, so we could have talked about the racing for hours, but there is some other news to get to before we wrap this week. Dr. Michael Galvin, a longtime equine veterinarian at Belmont Park in New York, has been issued a notice of violation by the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority for allegedly failing to submit over 3,900 treatment records. I'm quoting from the Pollock Report story here. The penalties for this violation include a fine of up to $50,000 and potentially a lifetime ban from the sport. I'm mostly going to toss it to John on this one because he's a little more in the know in terms of the backstretch rumblings about guys like this. But I do think this is like kind of usually an underreported factor in people trying to take an edge in the sport. We always hear about the trainers, and the trainers get like the big headlines when they get popped. A lot of the vets that these guys use are really the brains, such as they are, behind the operation and trying to cheat. And I'm not suggesting that Michael Galvin is definitely a cheating vet, but 3,900 plus failures to report veterinary records does not reflect well on him. If that's true, he was sent the notice of violation on August 23rd, 2024. He failed to report approximately 3,951 treatments administered to 497 horses between January 1st, 2023 and March 7th, 2024. So if indeed he is a dirty vet and he's not doing the right things by the horses, this is a big step for HISA. But John, you know a little bit more about this than I do. What's your impression?
Well, it's good that HISA's net is trying to capture not only trainers who are taking an edge and doing things that are illegal and immoral, but now they're also broadening their horizons to veterinarians and owners as well. But in this case, with a veterinarian who failed to report that many different treatments over almost 500 horses, Joe. So the question is, did he just not, issue or identify, report any of the horses that he's been working on over the years, or since HISA's, implemented this protocol? Or is it that he purposely, eschew didn't include these 500 horses that were being looked upon or that he was working on? But the thing that's interesting the most in the Pollock Report not only talks about, the notice of violation and the fact that Galvin now only has until the 30th, which is Monday, I believe, to get back to them, with any kind of a response. Or is it Friday? That's right.
Friday.
Today's,
yep.
Yeah. exactly. So Friday. So he only has that small window of time. But it talks about also who else Galvin's main clients are. And again, innocent, not innocent, anywhere in between in the spectrum, doesn't matter. But it wasn't a surprise that this happened. To me, it was a surprise that it happened so quickly. And that according to the rules, they're only giving Galvin a week to basically respond to this. So there must be more in the background that we don't know about. Because if you're threatening to take somebody to a lifetime ban, then my guess is they probably have the goods on them.
Yeah. Well, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, but did we even have this standard of reporting before HISA came around?
I don't remember. What I used to have to do is go to Thoroughbred Rulings, which is an unofficial website that basically occasionally takes some information from trainers and owners and jockeys that have fines or violations. And it was like an archaic website that occasionally would update every now and then. But that's where I would go when I would look to see whether or not people in the industry had committed any kind of problems or any issues, and those were like finable offenses. So it was anywhere from somebody didn't hand the paperwork on time to they didn't register a groom, licensed groom as one of their own, all the way to any kind of medical or medication violations. But no, this is part of the overall plan of HISA and HIWU is to not only, implement the rules and then investigate, people who potentially are violating the rules, but also post publicly what's going on. And I think that's another layer of transparency that people have been screaming for in the industry, is just get an idea of what's going on. Again, Joe, I want you and I both agree, and we're both saying that everyone is innocent until proven guilty. All we're saying is that this wasn't a surprise that this was a name that came up.
Yeah. No, I mean, and this follows Vince Baker, if you remember, being put on probation last year, like almost a year ago to the day, being put on 4 years of probation by the California Veterinary Medical Board for allegedly having several causes of discipline, including negligence, unprofessional conduct, dispensing, quote, dangerous drugs without medical necessity, failure to establish a veterinarian client-patient relationship, record-keeping violations, and failure to provide necessary drug consultation. So I do think, that wasn't necessarily HISA, that was California's regulatory agencies that went after Vince Baker. But yeah, I think that it's been underreported over time how much the vets affect whether or not the horses are racing in a clean sport. So we'll stay tuned and watch this space for further updates on that. So it's very, very interesting. Moving back to the racetrack just for a moment, I wanted to mention that for the first time, Next is being considered for a Breeders' Cup race. Now, a lot of people want him to run in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, which is this coming closing Saturday at Saratoga. 1.25 miles, you think it would be up his alley. Who really is pointing there to be scared of? But no, he's going to run the Greenwood Cup, probably against like 2 or 3 horses in September and early September or late September on the Parks Pennsylvania Derby card. But Doug Cowens did mention that the Classic and the Breeders' Cup Turf are potential options for him after that. And I would say, yes, please. Either of those would be great. We want to see this horse tested. As fabulous as he is, it just gets boring watching him beat up on the same 3 or 4 tomato cans that are left in the marathon division at this point. And those races are just becoming completely unwatchable. We want to see him tested. It's interesting that he's considering the turf because if you remember, when he was claimed, he was initially a turf horse. And then he went back to the dirt, and then they found out he was an absolute monster going along on the dirt, so they never went back to the grass. He thinks that the 1.5 miles of the turf might suit him better than the 1.5 miles of the Classic. I don't care which one. Just put him in a race where someone can eyeball him. I got to see what he can do when he's at his absolute best, because what he's done already is phenomenal. But I think there's something left in the tank, and I want to see it. So we're excited for that. Hopefully that comes to fruition. One other quick story to mention and one thing to look forward to. Kentucky Downs opens this week. Starts this Thursday, August 29th. It's a 6-day meet. They're big. Every day just has tons of purse money. Their big day is this Saturday with the Nashville Derby, and West Point is lucky enough to have a 1-2 punch in that race for $3.1 million. Cugino and Carson's Run. Carson's Run is a little bit of a surprise entry because he just ran in the Saratoga Derby a couple of weeks ago, but he's doing so well that the Clements are like, we got to take this shot. You don't get to run in big money races like this outside of the Breeders' Cup, especially with grass horses. So I think it makes a lot of sense. Cugino drew outside, which is going to be a little bit tricky, but I'm excited to see him as well. We've got Don't Look Back at All in the ladies' turf sprint. What's so great is like that's a $1.5 million race for Kentucky breds. She's a PA bred. She's still running for $900,000. So these purses in these races are just absurd. If you look at the opening day card, I see a bunch of DJ stable horses in there for these $250,000 allowance. These $170,000 made in special weight races. And these are not fields lined with killers, my guy. Like, I know I don't mean to blow up your spot here, but for it just shows like how shrewd you and DJ Stable are to be taking advantage of these races, because I look at these $170,000 maiden races and it's like a bunch of horses with like 50 and 60 buyers. It's unbelievable that more people aren't taking advantage. John, I mean, you know, I know the secret's out, my guy. Don't just tell me a little bit about your approach to Kentucky Downs.
Well, I think like anything else, you want to have horses that Kentucky Downs is a very unique meet. Very unique meet, not only in the dollars that are being offered, but also the vantage points. And probably most importantly, Joe, is the track itself replicates like the European tracks. So you have to have a very athletic horse to run on these undulating, tight turned, goofy, non-oval, kind of liver-shaped racetracks. So you can't send horses over there that normally you'd say, well, distance horses, they're usually the most sturdiest and the ones that show the most stamina. They're bigger. You don't want that. You don't want that at Kentucky Downs because they're going to get literally bogged down in that turf course. So we've taken some of our horses that are a little bit lighter, a little bit more European-esque, and run them. We have Taco Cat Backwards, which is everybody's favorite filly. Make It to Cheyenne and Heat in the Keeneland sales allowance race on opening day. And then we have a couple more that are coming up, throughout the week, Joe. But it's not Kentucky Downs isn't a secret, but what is a secret is the kind of horse that you need to run there. And I think that your horses are actually going to fare very well. I haven't seen the entries yet, but they're very athletic type horses, and that's what you need there. You don't go to Kentucky Downs as a person if you expect to see great racing, because you can't. There's no good vantage point there. There's no stands. There's no permanent structures really for all intents and purposes. The race is kind of like a rumor. It's kind of like who's in front. Well, you can't really tell by the camera angle, and sometimes when it's windy, the cameras are moving like literally like degrees at apart, so you can't really even see who's doing what. But they pay really well, and the races are really for the money, they're easy to pick off.
Yeah, no doubt. And I'm surprised that like Chad Brown and like some of these other major trainers have not rated Kentucky Downs more than they already have. It's usually Mike Maker's playground. Right. He's the guy that's been kind of the king over there over the years. So really looking forward to that meet. And the one thing I'll say as a handicapper, the one angle, and it's an interesting point you make about the lighter framed horses doing a little better on that turf course. The other thing is I think you need tactical speed.
Yes.
I don't see a ton of deep closers winning from there because that last bit of the stretch is an incline.
Right.
So it's a hard deal to be coming from that far back and then have to run uphill for like the last 1/8 or 16th of a mile. I think it typically tends to favor horses who are at least within couple lengths of the front at the 8th pole or the 3/16th pole.
Right, exactly. And actually, Joe, since you mentioned that, I'm proud to report that fan favorite and show favorite Web Slinger is going to, who comes from way out of it, is going to be running in one of the $500,000 handicaps on what is it on the 1st of September.
Hey, if anybody can do it, Webby can.
Webby can.
Rail Talk is sponsored by TaylorMade. When you're with TaylorMade, your family. And as I said, deadline reminder, the November breeding stock sales, there's still time to enter. And if you're doing so, there's no better place, no better consigner to do it with than TaylorMade. They treat every client, every horse like they're the most important client or horse in the barn. Their success speaks for themselves. They obviously specialize in the yearling sales. So we got Keeneland September right around the corner. Expect them to be the leading consigner there once more. But they do it all. Weanlings, broodmares, horses of racing age, horses in training. They'll get you and your horse to the sale in the best shape, in the best possible light, so you can realize the maximum return for your horse. And TaylorMade Stallion roster, not too early to start thinking about matings for 2025. I mentioned it last week. You got the Tacitus colt that is going to be in the West Point colors next year. He's sold out. We got a tiny bit left on the Instagram filly. There's a really nice Instagram filly who ran a close third on Saturday in the Travers for Chad Brown and Larry Best. It was very, very live race, and she was beaten like a length, or he was beaten like a length on the wire, ran huge. Instagrams have really been coming on. There was a horse who won and over the weekend in a stake at Century Mile. I know it's Century Mile, but a stake winner is a stake winner, especially for a young stallion. So shout out to everybody at TaylorMade as they prepare for the yearling sales. Go check them out, and go check out that stallion roster as well. All right, so that's going to do it for episode 58. This was a fun one. This is back to our roots, just me and John talking about great racing, busting each other's chops. Doesn't get any better than this. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. Thank you to our producer, Patty Wolf. Welcome back, Patty. Appreciate you as always. Thanks to our associate producers, Julia Agresta and Nathan Wilkinson. Shout out to the sponsors, shout out to the viewers, shout out to the listeners. 10,000 subscribers, baby. If you haven't done it, hit that button. Tell everybody you know to hit that button. We love you all. Here's to the next 10,000.